Were you ever that one in 1 million? If so, what's your story? Story 1. Not me, my wife. We lived in Jacksonville, Florida. She rarely gets sick, but has mild insomnia. Around Wednesday, she had a low fever and complained of aches and sweats at night and trouble sleeping. That weekend, she wanted to see the doctor. I told her she probably had the flu, just wasn't used to the aches, and she'd always has trouble sleeping, but if she was still feeling bad Sunday, we'd go to a clinic. Saturday night, she couldn't sleep, so we made an appointment for Sunday afternoon. But on our way there, sure enough, she's feeling better. Doctor checks her out. She's feeling fine now. No fever. He says she probably had meningitis but is recovering. I'm due to go on a business trip to California the next day, Monday, and ask him if he thinks it's fine that I go. He says, yeah, no problem. That evening, my wife is eating and laughing and all is good. Monday morning, I leave early. That afternoon, my neighbor calls. It lets me know my wife was wandering in the street in a delirium. My wife didn't know where she was, so the neighbor drove her to the ER. I booked a flight home that night. The hospital checks her out. She has a fever. Her blood cell count is in the basement, and she is completely out of it mentally. They're not sure what's wrong, and a bunch of specialists start descending on her. I have to fill out a bunch of paperwork on her medical history, where we've been, etc. They think maybe it's some weird autoimmune disorder. Not good. She gets a bunch of transfusions and puts on a cocktail of meds while they figure it out. Third day in the hospital, the infectious disease guy comes in. Blood parasite, maybe tick-borne. She'd been to the Midwest recently, caught it if she went walking in the woods or a park. Next day he comes in, figured out the parasite. Why didn't you tell me she left the country? Huh? She hasn't? Well, she has malaria. Malaria? I thought you couldn't get that in the US. You can't. You need to go home and bring me her passport. What the hell? I retrieved her passport. CDC comes, does a whole case study on her, which they wouldn't release to us. Mosquito traps are set up around the neighborhood. Mysterious vans start driving by spewing clouds of stuff. My wife stays in the ICU for a week, but recovers just fine. If you look at the 2010 CDC infectious disease report, you'll see a discussion of malaria and how the X and number of cases all are related to people recently returned from endemic areas, except for one woman in Duval County, Florida, who received it from a cryptic vector. Story 2. When I was 14 years old, I woke up one day with heavy stomach cramps. We called the hospital, and they told us that I probably have a stomach flu and should go to the doctor next morning. After one of the worst nights ever, vomiting and sleeping next to the toilet, we went to the doctor. I had a fever of 40 degrees Celsius and was aching a lot. The doctor told me I had to go to the ER and have it checked out because she thought my appendix was inflamed and causing the pain. We went to the ER, and I stayed in the hospital for about 2 weeks, but they couldn't find anything. They treated me with broad-range antibiotics, and after 2 weeks, I was feeling a bit better, and they told me to go home and recover. The night I got back from the hospital, I went to bed. Started hallucinating that I lived in a retirement home, and that pirates were coming to steal our food. So I was flailing around trying to fend off pirates when my mother came in and asked what all the fuss was about. I told her what was going on, and she looked at me like I had summoned a devil. She took my temperature and she instantly took me to the ER again. I had a 41 degrees Celsius fever. When we went back to the hospital, I got treated immediately for inflammation, and they did a wide range of tests again. They saw that something in my body was inflamed, but they couldn't find it. I stayed in the hospital for about 2 more weeks when they finally found what was going on. My appendix was inflamed and burst the night I was having hallucinations, but on all the scans they couldn't see my appendix. The doctor told me that if I came in 2 days later, I would have died because of the pus flowing in my body. Apparently, there is a 1% chance of all the appendix cases that the appendix is so stretched out that they couldn't see it on the scans, or that the area was so inflamed they didn't see it. So after staying on antibiotics for about 2 more weeks, they'd finally removed my appendix, and all the pain was gone. I stayed in the hospital for over 4 weeks just because of my appendix and my bad luck on being that 1%. Story 3. How I met my wife. I'm from the Netherlands. She is from the US. We met in Israel. It was my first weekend in Israel, so I decided to go on a pub crawl to meet some people and have fun. As I'm buying the ticket, my now wife walks up to the counter to also buy a ticket. The girl working there introduces us. We hit it off the first night, but I'm leaving in 2 days to stay with friends of friends in the middle of the desert for 3 months. 2 days after I leave, I lose my phone. I don't have any way to get back in touch with her. I have little money and could stay/work with the people in the desert. But I kept thinking about her, so after a week I say I'm leaving. Take the next bus. Goes 3 times a week at 5 a.m. and then a train to Tel Aviv. I had no idea how to find her, where to stay, and very little money. I email a couple hostels to find a work/stay agreement. Those jobs are very popular and usually planned months in advance. I get an email back when I arrive in Tel Aviv. I can come in for an interview because they have a spot. This is already ridiculously lucky. Right after the interview and dropping of my belongings, I went back to the first hostel to see if they would give me information. They wouldn't give me anything. Now I'm at a loss. Tel Aviv is a city of more than 500,000 people. I don't know anyone and have little more than the clothes on my back. Kind of defeated, I start wandering around/exploring the city. After a couple hours, I get hungry and decide to treat myself to a restaurant. I'm well out of the tourist area and find a place that's almost empty and rather cheap. I sit down, order a drink and something to eat. As I get my food, I see my now wife walking past the restaurant. She sees me, I see her. I'm literally dumbstruck and just kind of grin and wave. Remember how I'd lost my phone. She didn't know that and just thought I ignored her. She waves and keeps walking. I throw like 200 shekels, way too much, on the table and sprint after her. Explained, and the rest is history. Story 4. I was actually homeless for 4 years between 19 to 23 years old. As silly as it sounds, I used to earn some extra money at the time by helping around in a Yu-Gi-Oh tournament. It was my biggest hobby when I was younger and was something I felt confident about. I also didn't have a passport or a bank account, so I couldn't get a normal job, UK. Anyway, at the time I was stuck not earning enough money, without a passport, a bank account, or a real job. In the UK, you won't get hired by 99% of companies if you don't have a passport to prove you have the right to work. So one day I got a phone call from a studio asking if I played Yu-Gi-Oh and would consider myself a geek, also if I wanted to be in a TV show. They said they would send me to another country as part of it. Being homeless, the biggest problem is being bored, so naturally I said yes, but told them I don't have a passport. No problem, we'll get you one straight away and pay for it ourselves. I ended up on a show called Geeks that you can still watch on Channel 4 OD. Because I got this passport, I was finally able to get a job, a bank account, and finally a house. Now I'm looking after my 10-month-old daughter who's playing while I type this. So Yu-Gi-Oh saved me from being homeless. I might be an anon character. Story 5. I lived in Florida for the first 18 years of my life and spent most of my free time outdoors, fishing, camping, what have you. The summer before my junior year of high school, I found myself out hiking nearby by my home with a buddy. We were stomping around in some clay deposits inside of a little ravine. Even minimal geographic relief is dramatic in a place as flat as the Gulf Coast when it started to rain in Florida. For those of you who can't relate, imagine a torrential downpour. Our minds immediately jumped to the exciting possibility of flash flood raging through the crevasses we were exploring. In an effort to make our day more exciting and not take any chances, we began to climb vertically out of the canyons versus taking the lengthy path out of it horizontally. We got to the top, put our feet on the ground, and pulled up. As I stood up, I felt the ground underneath me squirm. I had stepped on a snake. I screamed and kicked the snake that was latched onto my foot off me by reflex. As an Eagle Scout, I immediately recognized the red on yellow pattern as the snake slithered away and knew it was a coral snake. We rushed home, drove to the hospital, and were seen. The doctors informed my parents the nearest Antivenin was a 3-hour helicopter ride away. The first symptom, lung failure, would occur after 2 hours. My parents called my friends and family, and we all spent time together without me knowing my fate. My friends and family arrived and subsequently left together. My parents turned off the lights and we prayed together. Around 2 hours after being bitten, a nurse came into our dark room with a gurney to collect my dead body. I asked the nurse, "Have there been any developments?" To her surprise, the doctors came in shocked I was alive, told me it was a dry bite, and that I should remain whatever religion I practiced. Story 6. I survived earlier this month from hypothermia. By walking with my brother in -40 with wind chill to the liquor store, we were already drunk a bit and never checked the weather. Got the bottle, headed back to chill in the fort, but I passed out. He ran to grab my dad and wake him up to get the truck. I was probably passed out for 10 minutes whilst they found me, dragged me into the truck, and to the hospital where the doctor said I didn't have a chance, and my father should be waiting for the call. I remember I woke up with the doctor shoving a big-ass breathing tube in my throat, but I couldn't breathe. I was restrained to the bed trying to take it out, and I remember a nurse saying, "Breathe," and I did, once every 5 seconds, until the doc finally said, "Take it out," and he did. I gasped for life when they took it out, so relieved I remember. I looked at myself in a gown hooked up like a robot, wires connected to me, and 3 machines around me and like 6 people in the room. Then the alarms on the machines went off and I blacked out. They monitored me for 8 hours until I was stable. I died in cardiac arrest for about less than 5 minutes, could be less. I was revived successfully and monitored closely. I woke up a day later, seeing my mother and brother. However, I was so high on morphine I think that I mumbled a few words and smiled at Mom until I passed out. I fucking survived. I honestly am glad I survived. My hands got really bad frostbite, but it's normal now. This happened on the 10th and I'm recovering with a new lease on life.